Hey, good afternoon to you. It's 3:06 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, the man who once had to write down every word Joe Biden uttered, Mike McCormick, former stenographer for Joe Biden, joins us to talk about apostrophes and garbage. That's all ahead. At 4 o'clock, Jason Sneed is here with the Honest Elections Project, as we have a bunch of new voter integrity headlines to share with you, including a big victory for Virginians as the Supreme Court says, no, you can't put non-citizens back on the voter rolls right now. That's insane. And Mark Hemingway is with us at 5:30 from Real Clear Investigations. We'll talk to him about how Kamala's campaign is manipulating the social media platforms. The left loves doing that. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Kamala Harris held a very dark rally yesterday, echoes of 1925, when the KKK marched through Washington. She did it again last night. This time it was on Joe Biden's lawn. Actually, it's our lawn. It's the people's lawn, but it was at the White House, right there at the Ellipse. With the White House in the background. Joe was not invited to this event. Joe was nowhere to be seen. Isn't that interesting? It's not even that far. You know, the one time they can save taxpayer money, they didn't do it. He could have walked to this event. It took no fuel, nothing. And they decided, no, we're going to keep him away. And here's the message of unity that Kamala Harris was sharing last night.
Donald Trump intends to use the United States military against American citizens who simply disagree with him.
She lied. She just said, yeah, the military is going to be used to target American citizens should Trump return to the White House. Yeah. Yeah, you remember that? The Trump era when the military was turned against the American people? So crazy. It's so crazy. So that was Kamala Harris last night at an event. I saw some analysis online of the cell phone data. Did you know that like a huge percentage of the people who did show up to Kamala's speech last night, it turns out, according to cell phone data, they go to all of Kamala Harris's events? It's the same people. They just wheel them around the country. They pull up the U-Haul, open it up, and outpours all of her support, if you can call it that. So Kamala Harris, her closing argument done in Washington, D.C. But it was at that very same moment that President Joe Biden was doing a Zoom call, now infamously, with an organization called Voto Latino. Voto Latino. And why was there a Zoom call going on? It's supposed to be a campaign event, right? It was meant to be a campaign Zoom call, that he was like helpful to Kamala Harris. And during this call, in his effort to help Kamala get across the finish line with Latino voters, President Joe Biden declared, you know who's garbage? Trump supporters.
Oh, the Puerto Rican that I know, or Puerto Rico, where I'm in my home state of Delaware.
But I just have to pause that for a moment and just marinate in the fact that Biden almost said that he was from Puerto Rico last night. Also, in that if it wasn't for the fact that he called half of America garbage, you and I would be chuckling today that Joe Biden said he was from Puerto Rico, which of course he's not.
Oh, the Puerto Rican that I know, or Puerto Rico, where I'm in my home state of Delaware. They're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization of Latinos is unconscionable, and it's un-American. It's totally contrary to everything we've done.
The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters, says the President of the United States, insulting and demonizing more than half the country. Par for the course. And I love all the lefties who are acting like, well, first of all, one of the games they're playing is with punctuation. And we're going to talk to Mike McCormick about this coming up. But when they say, well, he said his supporters, what he meant was his supporter apostrophe S. What? What is this explanation? What are you trying to say? Well, he's got a stutter. They claim that Joe Biden was merely talking about the insult comic who spoke at Madison Square Garden this past weekend. And he was saying He's specifically, Tony Hinchcliffe is specifically garbage. That's the allegation. That's what the White House is now claiming in an effort to clean all of this up. That's the cleanup job. It's the weakest possible cleanup job you can imagine. You heard what he said, right? You heard it.
The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like he was talking about one person. This is, of course, not the first time that somebody has expressed this view this week. In fact, Tim Walz has been saying that Trump supporters are Nazis this week. I love that, lost in all of the back and forth about what did Biden really mean, and the Kamala campaign is distancing itself from Biden's comments, and on and on and on. You know, Tim Walz said that a Trump rally was a Nazi rally this week. That's literally a part of their campaign. They're out there making this claim. And we're all just acting like, the media is acting like, this is an isolated incident. This never happens. In fact, here you go. I've got some audio for you here. This is Tim Walz talking to a local CBS affiliate about whether or not the Nazi thing is the kind of thing you should be saying as a vice presidential candidate.
I want to get your reaction to the president's comments, but I want to put it into a larger context of your recent comment comparing the Sunday Trump rally to a Nazi rally.
Oh, this is national CBS.
And I would also throw in there Obama's bitter clingers, guns and religion comment from a while back, the deplorable line from Hillary Clinton's campaign, and the way that Democrats are seen by some voters as disrespecting them. And I have to ask, does that undercut this closing message of unity from your campaign?
No, certainly not. And for Tony, for me, I've represented rural areas. I've represented Democrats, Republicans, independents. Same thing with the vice president. Look, you saw a presidential speech last night at the Ellipse that is the best of America, one that's talking about unifying us.
Oh, please, unifying us. Trump's going to get the military to shoot you in the head. He's going to raid your house. That's very unifying. What a unifying message from Kamala Harris, who is desperately trying to cast aspersions on her political opponent in the hope that it sinks him. Speaking of a garbage candidacy, what Kamala Harris has put on display is just frightful. Tim Walz did speak to a local affiliate, ABC, this week, one of the few reporters in the country who would dare ask a question like this. Good for this guy. He says, do you actually stand by your comments saying that Trump's rally was like a Nazi rally?
You said over the weekend, referring to it, there's a direct parallel to a big rally that happened in the mid-1930s at Madison Square Garden.
Well,
you were comparing that rally to a Nazi rally?
Look, I'm comparing it to the hate that came out of this, and I think they confirmed that.
You stand by that comparison, though, to a Nazi rally?
Look, the rally, you saw it for yourself. I'll let the American public make the decision of what they saw.
What about you, though?
So I know what I saw, and I'll just leave it at that.
What a coward. So he comes out and he's like, yeah, it's like a Nazi rally. And the guy goes, so you stand by those comparisons? He's like, I'm just going to let the public decide. So he's not backing away from that comparison. It's like a Nazi rally. No, it wasn't at all. In fact, it was a joyous, wonderful, diverse, enthusiastic, massive, pro-America rally. That's what it was. It was so packed to the gills that tens of thousands of people were outside who couldn't get in. Also, isn't it interesting that there wasn't left-wing rioting outside of Madison Square Garden? Don't you find that kind of intriguing? Just dog-ear that thing. Dog-ear that, would you? Just save that in your mind somewhere. We'll come back to it at some point. But no rioting outside of Madison Square Garden. The left has kept its foot soldiers at bay for these events. Curious about that. Back to this ABC 12 reporter. He's batting 1,000 because he had Tim Walz and then he had Kamala Harris. And so he asked her, he's like, hey, I just talked to Tim Walz yesterday. He's still comparing Trump's events with his supporters to Nazi rallies. You support that, Kamala?
I talked with Governor Walz yesterday. Okay. He compared Trump's rally on Sunday to that of one of the Nazi rallies in the 30s at Madison Square Garden. Do you compare that? Do you find that a similar comparison?
Listen, this election is in 7 days, and I think the American people have a very clear choice. And on the one hand, you have Donald Trump, who is constantly fanning the flames of division. And
you and your running mate are saying that his supporters are Nazis.
Hate, who is trying to have the American people point their fingers at each other or my leadership, which is founded on a lived and experience that the vast majority of us have more in common than what separates us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's Kamala Harris. The White House is trying to clean everything up today and claim, it's totally fine. You know, that garbage rhetoric, it's civil. It was very unifying.
Does he think less of Americans who support Trump than he does of those who do not? Yeah. And two, why is he using that kind of rhetoric? How is that presidential?
So a couple of things. So just to clarify, he was not calling Trump supporters garbage, which is why he put out.
One second. Let me make sure I've got that right. He was not calling Trump supporters garbage. I kind of feel like, if I can find that, here.
Or Puerto Rico, where I'm in my home state of Delaware, they're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters.
Okay. He was not calling them garbage.
Which is why he put out. This is why he wanted to make sure that we put out a statement that clarified what he meant and what he was trying to say. And so just want to make that very clear for folks who are watching.
What he meant is it was a compliment. It was, when I say garbage, it means I love garbage. I think garbage is wonderful, and you should want to be garbage. Corinne kept spinning. This is actually one of my favorite features of the day.
His language was not specific. It came out, if you were listening to that video.
I was in the room, Amr. I was in the room.
I'm sorry, but if you were listening, but if you were any sort of normal person.
He was as incomprehensible as I am on a routine basis.
Person listening to that video or looking at the clips online, you could come to the conclusion that he was calling, at minimum, this one man garbage. Or not, if not all Trump supporters garbage. Does he regret not being more precise with his language? And does he also?
I'm waiting for the question to end, but keep going.
And
because it's making me so nervous.
Apologize. Yeah, the second part of that is, does he have any regret for how this has shadowed Vice President Harris's campaign?
So a couple of things there, because there's a lot that you laid out.
Yeah.
So look. The president wanted to clarify because he understood that what he may have said he understood that what he was saying was being taken out of context. So he wanted to be very, very clear about what he was trying to say.
So why was it clear in the first place if he needed to release a statement after to clarify the context? It's so insane. And we have here some interesting information. CNN had a report yesterday that President Joe Biden's role in the 2024 presidential campaign in the final weeks of the election has been moved even further out of the spotlight as recent campaign trail gaffes, these are gaffes, these are oopsies, prompted a range of responses, from eye rolls to outright anger from some of Harris's campaign aides. These are the stories I live for. I like how this is going. I really hope it results in a losing campaign for Kamala Harris, and then we get a lot of these, palace intrigue stories, everything spilling out. Oh, my gosh. The Biden people are awful. The Kamala Harris people are awful. The finger pointing is already beginning. Planning for a range of Biden events had been up in the air late last week as the campaign worked to reassess how best to use the incumbent. What's the best way to use him? Who now plans to make several solo stops this week, including an infrastructure speech in Baltimore and an address to union members in Philadelphia and an appearance in his hometown of Scranton. Right, Scranton, Delaware, his hometown. Which is, I love that he gets to claim all of these different hometowns. Which is his hometown? Is it Scranton, Pennsylvania, or is it Wilmington, Delaware? What's his actual hometown? Biden's impromptu attack on former president and GOP nominee Donald Trump in New Hampshire spurred a flurry of coverage outside the scope of the event, raising concerns among Harris aides and allies about singular comments getting amplified in the final stretch of the race. Quote, "We've got to lock him up," Biden said. Remember that? That was just a couple days ago. Biden referred to former Representative Gabby Giffords as well, who survived being shot in the head at a 2011 campaign event, in the past tense, suggesting that she was no longer alive. Remember that one too? This was just in the last week. Biden said, "We've got to lock Trump up." He says he was friends with Gabby Giffords, who he assumed was dead. Not dead, very much alive. And he just said that Trump supporters are garbage. They're garbage. And the campaign is trying to figure out how to tactically use Joe. What's our strategy? How can we best use his skill set? Well, if this is an example of how you're best using his skill set, will you please do more of that? Please put him on the campaign trail every single day until Election Day. Send him out to do solo events. Make sure that microphones are on. Make sure that cameras are trained on him. Because if this is how his presidency ends, it'll be very, very fitting. Well, we've reached the point in the campaign where Kamala Harris is now distancing herself from Joe Biden. Obviously, she's been doing that a lot. She's pretended like she wasn't even a part of his administration. Joe who? How would your administration be different? I'd be a different person. Here's Kamala today, asked about Biden calling Americans garbage.
Have you spoken to President Biden since his comment last night about garbage?
Listen, I think that, first of all, he clarified his comments, but let me be clear, I strongly disagree with any criticism of people based on who they vote for. You heard my speech last night and continuously throughout my career. I believe that the work that I do is about representing.
What a lie. Yeah, of course, she's going to really... She said last night that if Trump is elected, the military is going to be shooting Americans. That's what she said in that speech last night. And so are we to take her seriously that she loves you if that's who you vote for? if you vote for the guy who's going to, if you vote for Hitler, it's totally fine. She's on Team U. Come on. Phil, Fredericksburg, line 6. Phil, you're on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hello, sir.
Hey, look, I just wanted to thank Joe Biden for calling me garbage because I'm America-loving, Constitution-loving garbage. But I want to tell you something. Guess who knows garbage? Joe Biden knows garbage because he looks at garbage in the mirror every day.
Phil, short, sweet, to the point, devastatingly accurate, as usual. Thank you, Phil. Coming up, Mike McCormick will talk to us about that garbage, what it's like writing down Joe Biden's words when he's in a mood like that. Mike's done it. He'll tell us all about it and what's happening next. Hey, good afternoon to you. It's 3:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, we'll talk election integrity. A lot of stories on that front. We'll discuss that with Jason Sneed, including there's a story. Did you see a Chinese national just voted in Michigan illegally? They caught the guy, and the state of Michigan says, but his vote's going to count anyway. We can't remove the vote. It's all too crazy. We just need to, restore a sense of normalcy to our elections, integrity, credibility, simple things. Mark Hemingway will also be with us at 5:30 from Real Clear Investigations. We'll talk about how Kamala Harris's campaign is manipulating social media to rig the election. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Joe Biden laid it all out last night.
The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters.
The only garbage I see out there is his supporters, as clear as day. And yet the White House is now insisting that he wasn't actually saying that Trump supporters are garbage, and that it was merely a transcription error, that people didn't realize he was referring to supporter apostrophe S. He was talking about one supporter's garbage. For more on what it's like to write down Joe Biden's words in real time, let's go to a man who's done it. Mike McCormick is here. He's the author of The Midnight in the Laptop of Good and Evil Substack and a former stenographer for Joe Biden from 2011 to 2017. So under that definition, we can say he's long-suffering. Mike, good to have you with us, sir.
Hey, Vince, great to be back with you.
Okay. So the White House says he wasn't actually calling Trump supporters garbage. They're saying, don't believe your lying ears.
Oh, yeah. Joe Biden would say stuff off the top of his head like that constantly. And sometimes it came back at me. And, my job at that time was protect the principals in the White House. And so I'd kind of help Joe by putting in a dash or something. So this is an example of him getting help from I don't know if the stenographer's office put it in or the White House comms office told the stenographers to put it in this way. if I was writing that transcript, having heard that, I would have made it a plurals word and waited for them to tell me to change it. And, frankly, the way he said it, you can't say he didn't mean that. I mean, it can have that meaning. That's what he's known for. He's such a gaff. He's the king of gaffing. So, you don't know. So, yeah, they could change the transcript. They probably had to do it under orders. And he definitely said it. And he definitely meant we are all garbage if we support Trump.
Alex Thompson is a reporter for Axios, and he said the following last night. He said, I asked the White House how they knew Biden only meant supporter apostrophe S, as they have it in the now public transcript. Did they talk to Biden to ask him what he meant? The spokesperson asked to go off the record. We declined. They didn't comment further. So in other words, like the White House is going out of its way to cover up how this all went down.
Yeah, that's typical. And, his comms team they've been jumping through hoops since he got himself in there with a fraudulent election. And, that comms team they just ran out of magic to work. And, I think there's a real malevolence to Joe Biden. This is something that he has underneath the surface. He's always had it. And this is him sort of taking a shot at Kamala Harris. He doesn't care. He doesn't care what he says anymore. He's just going to say it. And if it comes out, it's Joe Biden, and he's just going to shrug it off. He's the president. In his mind, he's the best president ever. We all know that's coming to a crashing end. But in his mind, he thinks he can do whatever he wants. He's this Joe Biden, the greatest American president ever.
Yeah. One of the features of Biden's presidency, and I wonder your opinion on this, is that every time he speaks, they put a transcript up, or most of the time, they put up a public transcript on the internet. And when they do, they've had to make hundreds of changes or corrections to his literal words. They will put strike-through lines on words. They will put brackets in to tell you what he really meant. They will go out of their way to change the actual transcript in such a way as to correct him. Mike, is in your experience, having done this type of stenography, is that a normal practice?
No, that's not a normal practice, and I didn't have to do it to that extent with him when he was coherent. But obviously, since 2020, he's come in half-baked, and he's deteriorated greatly mentally. He just can't, they've been covering for him. They've been using the transcripts. They're using other methods. It's not working anymore. And here we have it, he's just out there. He's the millstone around the Democratic Party's neck. He's dragging him down to the bottom of the river.
Do you think it's a coincidence that his remarks were being delivered at the same moment that Kamala Harris was holding a rally on his lawn? She was doing she had a rally on the Ellipse just as he was doing this Zoom call with Voto Latino. I don't know who's dreaming this up, unless it's the Biden people who are trying to actively sabotage Kamala, which that's fun too. What do you make of the fact that those events happened at the same time?
Well, that's him definitely pulling an old school, old Paul dirty trick. That's him doing dirty Delaware tricks. No question about it. I was looking at talking about Kamala and transcripts. I was looking at a Kamala Harris transcript that she did at an event in Kalamazoo. She walked out to her overflow crowd who had just heard from Michelle Obama, and she spoke for 2 minutes. The transcript was 2 minutes long. That's the shortest transcript I've ever seen as a White House stenographer in 16 years. There must have been no one in her overflow crowd for her to talk to him.
Yeah, that's wild. That seemed insulting. People wait for a very long time because they got to get through Secret Service, and they come in, they stage, and to have somebody just show up for 2 minutes and then bounce, it's almost like an insult.
Yeah, and it's like she didn't know what to say. She didn't have anything to say because in an overflow crowd, there's no teleprompter. So she's got to go out there and speak, and she couldn't do it. She is absent in the office. She is not capable of speaking to a crowd and engaging with a crowd. That's unpresidential.
In your time working with Joe Biden, did you ever witness him, or do you recall his attitude towards voters who disagree with Democrats? Was it always this vicious?
Yeah, he was pretty nasty in 2012. And he tried to go out and do a lot of heavy lifting for Hillary in 2016. That was when he made that threat against Trump. I'll take him out behind the gym. It was 2016. He was up in Pennsylvania. He was like in Scranton, Pennsylvania. That's when he said it. So he's always had this sort of bravado. And, back then no one paid attention because he was the vice president and no one cared.
Yeah.
But now he's a president and it comes out and it's like a disaster.
Well, in 2012, if my memory serves me correctly, is the same year that Biden told a black audience that Mitt Romney, quote, would put y'all back in chains. That was his.
That's right.
That was his attitude in 2012.
That's right. That was down in Virginia, Southern Virginia. And
Danville. It was Danville, Virginia.
Danville, Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And what happened was he made a comment about Romney, and there was a guy who made an out loud laugh in the audience, and Joe saw him and basically was telling that guy. I didn't see who the guy was in the audience, but I think that it might have been a black voter who Joe was directing that to. And that's Joe being pretty nasty off the cuff.
Yeah. No, here is Joe Biden all the way back in 2012 saying he's going to put you all back in chains.
Look at what they value and look at their budget and what they're proposing. Romney wants to he said in the first 100 days, he's going to let the big banks once again write their own rules. Unchain Wall Street. They're going to put you all back in chains.
What
right.
a psycho.
Yeah. Yep, that's right. That's exactly right. And that's, he thought he was like the cool guy talking to the people. He used to talk to audiences and tell them that, he was talking to these Detroit voters from the hood. And they, he did this event in a community college in suburban Detroit. And the women were there doing this sort of camp to learn coding camp.
Yeah.
And he kept telling audience, oh yeah, they were from the hood. That's just Joe Biden trying to be cool and just coming out stupid. He does that all the time.
Yeah. My dad tells me a story every so often of Biden came to visit the military guys out in the Middle East while they were all forward deployed. And he goes into a room and he starts cursing like he's a sailor. He's like, we're going to effing do this and blah, blah, blah. It was just like so over the top. And he starts cursing because he thinks it's going to impress all these military guys. And they're all just like, they're being polite. But they're internally, they're just all rolling their eyes like, please, this is so stupid. He's pretending he's like that he's going to go out there with the Navy SEALs and like take out terrorists. It's just sort of preposterous, but it definitely fits the pattern with Joe Biden.
Yeah, that's right. And there's one other thing, Vince. I want to bring this up. Evgeny Vindman is running for Congress against Derek Anderson.
Yep.
And I think he is involved in covering up for Joe Biden's corruption in Ukraine. I think I've seen, he was in the White House in the NSC in 2018 with his brother, twins. They're both twins. They're both brought in the NSC.
Yep.
His brother was in Ukraine and he was working for the DOD over there. And Joe Biden and Hunter Biden were actively doing a kickback scheme with a biowarfare contractor called Metabiota. And I know that Alexander Vindman, in his role, would have known about this company. And if Devin Archer did a meeting in the embassy. That's where Vindman worked out of in 2014. He did an embassy meeting in 2014 about this. And so I think the Vindmans knew about this. I think they were put in the NSC. And Derek Anderson has to beat Yevgeny Vindman because Vindman is a deep state guy, and Anderson is a straight up and up guy who can stand up to the American voters.
So you think Vindman was tied up in Hunter Biden's business dealings?
I think they knew about it and they were covering for it. I think that's why they were brought into the NSC in the White House. I think it was some kind of a deep state move that put them in there.
Kind of fascinating. And remember, of course, they were the centerpiece for the impeachment of President Trump as well. So that it all comes back to that. And by the way, on Derek Anderson news, President Trump today said the following on X. He said, Derek Anderson is running to represent the wonderful people of Virginia's 7th Congressional District. He bravely fought for our great country as a Green Beret and was deployed to Afghanistan, Bahrain, Jordan, Israel, and Lebanon. Unlike the current administration, he never left anyone behind. Derek is America first all the way. He's running against a weak and pathetic Democrat. named Yevgeny Eugene Vindman, who, along with Adam Shifty Schiff and others, lied to push the Ukraine impeachment hoax, a continuation of the greatest and most dangerous political witch hunt in the history of our country. Derek Anderson has my complete and total endorsement. He will not let you down. And Mike McCormick, that's a seat that could decide control of the entire United States House of Representatives.
That's right. And it should. We can't let Vindman back. If you're in Virginia, get out there and vote, especially if you're in the 7th. Vote for Derek Anderson. And I think Virginia's going to go red. I've heard some good information about Fairfax County voters. There's a lot of low propensity voters who are shifting to the Trump train. And I think the Trump train has got room for Hung Cao and Derek Anderson on it.
It sure does. It has room for a lot of us. We just have to get that train moving. I'm totally with you on that. And people in Virginia, by the way, the early vote goes through Saturday. But you should get it in now. If you have not done it yet, get it in now. Just get all those votes in. They're going to make a world of difference. And Mike McCormick, I'm really appreciative of your time and all the information you always share. Thank you, sir. All right, let's go to Bob in Falls Church, line 1. Bob, you're on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hello, sir.
Hi, Vince. How are you?
I'm doing well, Bob.
Yeah. So listening to you in 2019 when I first moved into this area looking for Rush Limbaugh. I'm glad I've been on the air with you ever since. But
thank you.
About the remark, about Biden's remark on garbage.
Yeah.
No, I was watching the rally at that time, or the rally, and when that comedian made that comment, it took me aback too. I said, who let this guy in? And I could see the initial response could be taken the wrong way.
Uh-huh.
But what the response on Biden's thing, I was watching Trump's reaction initially on stage. He was kind of taken back. His first response was to forgive him. There was not enough made of mention about his sense of compassion for the president, who was rudely displaced by his own party.
Yeah.
As it was. And he didn't just say he's forgiven. He asked the people to forgive him too.
Let me play some of this. This is President Trump last night, I guess, finding out about this statement. What was it, Corey? Okay, we have a specific cut number. Cut 3. Let's go right to it. Here's President Trump last night.
That's terrible. That's what it says. That's what it says. So you have, remember Hillary, she said deplorable, and then she said irredeemable, right? But she said deplorable, that didn't work out. Garbage, I think, is worse, right? But he doesn't know. You have to please forgive him. Please forgive him, for he not knoweth what he said.
He said, forgive him, forgive him. That's a great point, Bob. I hadn't really even dwelled on that point as much as I probably should have.
And it's, you get that sense of character in him that's brought up on a lot of his private personal honors that you hear about, but the news doesn't report about.
Right.
And he's got a compassion for people who are done out whatever you want to do it. And he gets personal with it. And it wasn't his typical political bravado or whatever you want to call it. But,
yeah.
I just don't, unless you look for it, you won't come across the comment that way.
Bob, I appreciate this call. I can tell that you're the kind of person who detects the good in people, which makes me all the more happy that you decided to start listening to WMAL. I feel very honored by that. Thank you, Bob. Bob in Falls Church, recognizing that. Thank you, Bob. Recognizing that President Trump last night said, well, that is terrible that he would say that. Garbage is even worse than saying deplorable, but please forgive him. He not knoweth what he says. Amazing. All right, coming up. Jason Sneed talks to us about election integrity. A lot of big headlines on that subject coming up.